I woke up that morning expecting a normal day. Birds chirping, sun creeping through the blinds, coffee brewing, nothing out of the ordinary. And then I saw it. Bright orange stakes lining my property, measuring tape stretched across my yard, and worst of all, a construction crew setting up like they were building the next White House. I blinked twice, maybe 3 times. No, I muttered to myself, this can't be happening. But it was. The HOA had started building a clubhouse on my land, not the land they claimed, not the land that belongs to the community, my land. I grabbed my coffee and walked outside. Every step made the gravel crunch loudly, announcing my presence. The foreman turned, raising a hand in what I assumed was a polite greeting. I raised my eyebrows. You folks lost? I asked. Nope, he said, we're right where we're supposed to be. I squinted at the blueprint he was holding. It had my name scrawled on it right under the HOA seal. My stomach sank. That's my name and my property, and you're standing on it, I said. He smiled like he just told me the world was flat. Technically, it's part of the community plan now. I felt my jaw tighten. Community plan, I repeated, my voice rising. Those stakes, that bulldozer, you're literally trespassing. He laughed, told you it's all legal. I wanted to laugh too, but I didn't. Instead, I did something I've never done in my life. I clenched my fists and counted to 10, slowly, very, very slowly. I spent the next hour walking the boundary lines. My land, every tree, every flower bed, every inch that I had nurtured for years. And there it was, bright orange paint on my grass, stakes sticking out of the ground like little warning flags. They didn't even bother asking, not a phone call, not a friendly knock, nothing. I went inside, grabbed my laptop, and started digging. Public records, maps, satellite images, anything that could prove my claim, and as I scrolled, my mind raced. How could they be so bold, so arrogant, so utterly clueless about the one rule that matters: you don't build on someone else's property? Then came the letter. I almost laughed when I opened it. My HOA president's name printed in bold, commanding fonts. Fines, penalties, threats of legal action. Please remove the construction or face consequences, it read. I read it twice, then a third time. No, I was not dreaming. This was real. Someone had actually written a letter threatening me for their own trespassing. I called the HOA office. I imagined some sweet old lady would pick up and apologize for the confusion. Instead, a man with a clipped voice and zero sense of irony answered. Sir, we expect compliance, he said. Compliance with what? I asked. Your illegal construction on my property. Silence, then a sigh. We have our records. You are mistaken. I laughed hard, the kind of laugh that makes you feel part amused, part angry. Mistaken, I repeated. You're building a $150,000 clubhouse on my land, and I'm the one who's mistaken. He hung up. I stood there staring at the half-built structure. My blood was boiling, but somewhere underneath, a tiny spark of excitement flickered. This wasn't just trespassing, this was war, and I don't back down, not from neighbors, not from bureaucrats, not from a community that thinks it can bulldoze someone's life away. I walked around my yard, touching the fence posts, the garden edges, the driveway. Everything was mine. And if they wanted to test me, I was ready. I just didn't know how yet. But I knew one thing: this story wasn't going to end quietly. Not for me, not for them. And as I watched the sun glint off the construction helmets and the orange stakes, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I was going to do something they would never forget. Something bold, something unstoppable, something that would make them think twice before ever touching my land again. Little did I know, that morning, with coffee in hand, was the beginning of the most chaotic, hilarious, and satisfying chapter of my life. The next morning, I woke up to a mailbox full of doom. Letters, certified letters, notices, a pink slip from the HOA. I stacked them on the kitchen counter and stared, each one more ridiculous than the last. Immediate compliance required, cease and desist, fines will accrue daily. I couldn't help but laugh, literally laugh. My land, my rules, my driveway, and they were treating me like a criminal. A criminal for noticing that someone was building a $150,000 clubhouse on my property. I decided to call them. Surely a polite conversation could solve this. Surely common sense was still a thing. I dialed the HOA office and braced myself. Hello, this is Mr. Peterson from the Highland Pines HOA, said a voice, clipped and condescending. Yes, Mr. Peterson, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. I believe we have a small misunderstanding. You're building on my property. Sir, you are mistaken. That is community land, he said. I paused. Mistaken? I could hear the smugness in his voice. I wanted to snap back, but instead I smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. Community land, I repeated. You mean my land. Because the surveys say otherwise, the county says otherwise, and last I checked, the trees, the grass, and the fence posts also say otherwise. There was a long silence, then a cough. "Sir, we expect compliance," he said. Compliance, my jaw tightened. Compliance with what exactly? Compliance with someone else stealing my property. He hung up. I slammed the phone down, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't a clerical error. This was a full-on power play. They weren't going to back down, and if they weren't going to back down, neither was I. I spent the day documenting everything. Photos of the stakes, measurements of my property line, notes about the construction crew's activities. I even started filming with my phone, catching them hauling lumber and concrete, unaware that I was recording every single move. By late afternoon, I had stacks of evidence that could fill a courtroom, but more importantly, I had a plan forming. They thought fear and legal threats would make me give up. They didn't know me. Then came the neighbors. I didn't expect their support. Most of them had stayed out of HOA politics, but curiosity got the better of them. One by one, they wandered over, coffee cups in hand, raising eyebrows at the sight of a half-built clubhouse sitting smack in the middle of my property. "Wow, is that legal?" one of them asked. "Apparently," I said dryly, "legal according to fantasy law, but technically it's on my property." Their looks were priceless. Some laughed nervously, others whispered to each other, and a few nodded like they knew the HOA had finally bitten off more than they could chew. That night I sat at my desk, reviewing the legal documents I had pulled. The HOA had nothing, not a single legitimate claim to the land, and yet they were relentless, sending letters, calling me, threatening fines, even hinting at lawsuits. I leaned back in my chair, rubbed my temples, and thought, let them come. Because I wasn't going to play small. I wasn't going to let bureaucrats run over me. My land wasn't just a piece of property, it was my life, my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to watch anyone steal it. And then I realized something else. This could be bigger than just stopping them. If I played this right, documented everything, and used their own arrogance against them, I could turn this whole mess into a victory I'd never forget. Victory wasn't just about reclaiming my land. It was about proving a point, about standing up even when the odds seemed ridiculous, and maybe, just maybe, teaching a few people a lesson they'd never forget. I went to bed that night with a single thought repeating in my head: tomorrow, things are going to get interesting. Little did I know just how interesting they were about to become. The HOA was about to find out that I didn't just know my property lines, I knew exactly how to defend them, and I wasn't planning to play nice. I spent the next few days in what I like to call strategic mode. My friends called it obsession, I called it necessary. I wasn't just going to stand by while the HOA bulldozed their clubhouse across my property. No, this needed a plan, a perfect plan, something that would make them regret ever thinking they could push me around. I started with maps, county surveys, satellite images, Google Earth, and my own meticulous measurements. Every inch of my property was accounted for, every fence post, every tree, every inch of driveway. By the end of the first day, I could walk blindfolded around my property and tell you exactly where their clubhouse illegally sat. Then came the legal research. I pored over zoning laws, property rights, and HOA regulations like a caffeine-fueled detective. I found loopholes, technicalities, and every little quirk that favored property owners. I scribbled notes on sticky pads, stacked them across my desk like a fortress. By the time I was done, I knew their legal threats were laughably empty. They had the audacity to threaten me for their own trespassing, and I had every tool to fight back. But I needed evidence, hard evidence. So I borrowed a drone from a friend, nothing too fancy, just enough to capture overhead footage of the clubhouse creeping onto my land. I recorded every plank, every nail, every concrete pour. The workers had no idea I was documenting their every move. And the HOA, they had no idea that I was preparing a file so airtight it could make a grown lawyer weep with envy. The real fun began when I decided to gather some human witnesses. Neighbors, people who had seen the construction but hadn't spoken up because, well, most people fear the HOA more than they fear a bear. I went door to door, talking to them, explaining what was happening, and subtly asking them to keep notes of what they had seen. Their reactions were priceless. Half of them gawked in shock, the other half whispered, "Finally, someone is standing up to them." Meanwhile, the HOA kept sending letters. I stacked them in a binder labeled, "How Not to Win a Property Dispute." I started reading them out loud to myself for comic relief, each letter more absurd than the last, demanding compliance, threatening fines, claiming ownership. By the third letter, I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. By the end of the week, I had a blueprint for what I was going to do, and it wasn't small. I was going to make them stop, not with anger, not with yelling, but with smart, calculated action. something that would make them realize trespassing on my land wasn't just a mistake, it was a catastrophic misjudgment. I couldn't act recklessly, though. I needed timing, leverage, and impact. I plotted scenarios in my head, how I would confront the HOA, what evidence I would present, how to protect myself legally. I even imagined the look on the HOA president's face when he realized I wasn't intimidated. That alone made me grin like a kid who just discovered the ultimate prank. But I also knew I had to stay calm. If I acted too soon, I could ruin everything. If I hesitated too long, they could finish the clubhouse and make it official in their twisted bureaucratic minds. It was a delicate balance, one misstep and I'd be the laughingstock. One perfect move and I could turn this nightmare into a story everyone would remember. That night I sat at my desk, surrounded by maps, letters, and photos, sipping my coffee and smiling. I felt alive, not just angry, not just frustrated, but alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I was about to turn the tables and it was going to be glorious. Little did I know, the next morning would bring the first real confrontation, a moment that would escalate this battle from annoying HOA headaches to a full-blown cinematic showdown. And that's when I realized something. If I wanted to win, I couldn't just fight smart, I had to fight bold. And bold was exactly what I was about to do. The morning air was crisp, the kind that makes your skin tingle and your mind sharpen. I didn't have butterflies. I had tanks of adrenaline. Today I wasn't going to call or email. Today I wasn't going to argue or plead. Today I was going to act. I rolled out of bed, poured a strong cup of coffee, and stepped outside. My gaze fell on the orange stakes, the half-built clubhouse, the construction crew blissfully unaware that their next move would be memorable. I walked to the driveway and there it was, my bulldozer, heavy, intimidating, and ready. I had rented it a few days earlier under the guise of landscaping work. Perfect cover. Neighbors peeked from their windows. I waved casually as if nothing unusual was happening, but they could see it, they could feel it. A bulldozer on your property tends to make people very aware. I climbed into the cab, revving the engine slowly. The sound was low, threatening, like a growl that promised consequences. I stared at the clubhouse. Then, without a word, I began my approach. Each inch forward felt deliberate, cinematic, like the first scene in a showdown movie. The foreman noticed me first, his jaw dropped. Hey, you can't. But I didn't wait to hear the rest. I had the right, I had the proof, and I had the timing. Slowly, I pressed the bulldozer forward, nudging one of the orange stakes aside. Concrete dust puffed into the air. The construction crew scrambled, shouting, waving their hands, but there was nothing they could do. Every step I took was on my land. Every plank they tried to lay outside their legal boundary, off it went. I felt a rush of exhilaration. Years of frustration, of being ignored and threatened, melted into the roar of the engine and the power at my fingertips. The HOA president appeared, sprinting toward the site, papers flapping like a flag in the wind. "You can't do that," he yelled. His face was red, veins bulging, the kind of face people make movies about. "I already am," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. "You're on my property, that's not a suggestion, that's a fact." He lunged forward, trying to stop me. One of the workers grabbed his arm. Another shouted at the foreman. Confusion reigned, and all I did was keep moving, pushing stakes aside, nudging lumber back onto their side, and marking the boundary with my bulldozer like an artist painting a masterpiece. I could hear the neighbors gasping, some filming on their phones. I didn't care. This wasn't for them. This was for me, for my land. For every insult, every letter, every ridiculous fine the HOA had tried to slap on me. By midday, construction had halted completely. The crew refused to work any further without authorization. The HOA president was packing, muttering into his phone, probably calling lawyers. And me? I sat in the cab, engine idling, surveying my reclaimed land like a king surveying his kingdom. But as satisfying as it was, I knew this wasn't the end. The letters, the threats, the legal games, they were just beginning. The HOA might have lost this skirmish, but the war wasn't over. They would try something, and I had to be ready. I climbed down from the bulldozer, hands smudged with grease and dirt. I felt alive, more alive than I had in years. This was my land, my rules, and I had made the first move. And something told me they would never see the next one coming. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the plans I had laid out, sipping coffee that tasted sharper than ever. Tomorrow, I'd start the next phase. The phase where this little HOA learned that you don't bully someone who knows their property better than they know their bylaws. I smiled, thinking of the look on the president's face when he realized he had been outmaneuvered. That smile lasted long into the night because I knew deep down what came next would be even bigger, bolder, and far more satisfying. And I couldn't wait. The morning after the bulldozer standoff, I woke up to an inbox that could give anyone a panic attack. Emails, letters, certified mail slips, each one more aggressive than the last. Immediate legal action pending, cease and desist. You will be held liable for trespass, even though technically they were the ones trespassing. I sipped my coffee, scrolling through the digital mountain of threats. I couldn't help but smirk. These people really thought sending paper and typing in all caps would scare me. It didn't, not even a little. By mid-morning, my lawyer called. I could hear the excitement in his voice. They're panicking. We have all the evidence we need. The surveys, the drone footage, your documentation, it's airtight. I grinned, perfect, just the way I like it. But the thrill came with a warning. The HOA wasn't done yet. They had lawyers of their own, slick, polished, and ready to throw every technicality at me. The emails were just the opening salvo. What came next was going to be an all-out legal battle. I spent the day preparing, reviewing every survey, photo, and video I had. Each piece of evidence told the same story. The clubhouse was on my land. The stakes, the lumber, even the concrete foundations, they all confirmed it, and I knew how to use it. Every line of code, every measurement, every timestamp would be my shield and my sword. The HOA's response came fast. Their lawyer sent a notice demanding that I cease all interference with the construction and threatened immediate litigation. I read it carefully, then laughed out loud. Interference? I muttered. I'm defending what's mine. That's not interference. That's called property rights. Then the letters started arriving. Real legal letters full of fancy language, citations, and veiled threats. They tried to make me look like the villain. We urge you to reconsider, one read. Another, failure to comply will result in court proceedings and potential penalties. I poured myself another cup of coffee, leaned back in my chair, and let the absurdity wash over me. They were trying to intimidate me with words. I had concrete, stakes, video, and drones. I had a bulldozer that could practically serve as a visual argument in court, and most importantly, I had the truth. I could almost hear the HOA president muttering on the phone, panic creeping into his voice. The power had shifted, and he knew it. He had underestimated me, and now every lawyerly word he sent only added fuel to my fire. By late afternoon, I was ready. I organized my binder, maps, photos, drone footage, letters, and a detailed timeline of the construction. Every single thing I could use to dismantle their claims, step by step. I even added notes from neighbors who had witnessed the activity on my property. Witness statements, little observations, casual conversations, they all became part of the arsenal. That evening, I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension settle. I knew the next step would be critical. Court dates were being set, depositions scheduled, and the thought of standing across from the HOA president, smug and confident, made my pulse quicken. But there was a thrill to it too. I wasn't just defending land. I was standing up to arrogance. I was proving that no amount of bureaucracy, no number of letters, and no fake authority could overpower someone who knew their rights and was willing to fight for them. And as I stared out the window at the half-built clubhouse, now eerily quiet, I realized something important. They had crossed a line. They had underestimated me. And when the court date came, I wasn't just going to win. I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could play games with my property. Tomorrow, the real battle begins. The papers, the threats, the fear, they were just warm-ups. Soon everything would be on the line and I would be ready, because this wasn't just about land anymore. It was about standing tall, taking control, and showing that some fights are worth every ounce of patience, planning, and boldness you can muster. And in the back of my mind, I smiled. Just the thought of their faces in court made every late night, every document, every careful measurement worth it. Tomorrow, they would see exactly what happens when someone refuses to back down. The morning of the court date, I woke up with a strange mix of nerves and adrenaline. I didn't just have a bulldozer, surveys, and drone footage backing me up. I had weeks of planning, documentation, and sheer stubbornness. But sitting in a courtroom, that was a different battlefield entirely. I arrived early. The room smelled of polished wood and anxiety. The judge's bench towered at the front, a silent reminder that this was serious. Across the room, the HOA president sat with his lawyer, papers stacked neatly in front of them, faces calm but brittle, like fine porcelain ready to crack. I took a deep breath. This is it, I whispered to myself. Time to show them what happens when you mess with my property. The proceedings began, opening statements. The HOA lawyer, slick and rehearsed, painted a picture of a misunderstanding, claiming the clubhouse was community property and that I was interfering with development. I watched the HOA president's face, smug at first, twitch when I noticed the slight sweat forming at his hairline. Then it was my turn. My lawyer stood, laid out my evidence, and I followed quietly, feeling every eye in the room. We had surveys, drone footage, photographs, timestamps, letters. They couldn't argue against the proof that the clubhouse was on my land. I added witness statements, including neighbors who had seen the construction firsthand. The tension was electric. Every plank of the half-built clubhouse suddenly felt like a character in the story, each nail a line of evidence proving the HOA's overreach. The judge flipped through the files, brows furrowed, occasionally glancing up at me. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to breathe. Calm, focused, prepared. Then came cross-examinations. The HOA lawyer tried to trip up my witnesses, suggest errors, create doubt. He asked questions designed to confuse, to intimidate, to make it seem like I was overreacting. But my lawyer countered every point calmly, precisely, and with the air of someone who had been through this countless times. I watched the HOA president squirm. His confidence was cracking, just as I had imagined. And then the pivotal moment. My drone footage played on the screen for the court. Every angle, every shot, every timestamp was visible. The construction creeping onto my property, the workers moving lumber, the orange stakes marking my land, it all played out like a silent film. You could almost hear the collective gasp in the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Peterson," he said, addressing the HOA lawyer, "are you suggesting that this footage is inaccurate?" "No, Your Honor," he stammered, "but—" "No buts," the judge interrupted. "This appears to clearly show construction on private property." I felt a thrill. Every ounce of preparation, every sleepless night, every plan laid out had led to this. My land, my rules, my bulldozer, it wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And right now, the scales were tipping in my favor. The HOA president tried to speak, to argue, to plead, but even his words sounded weak, hollow. Every claim, every threat, every fine they had sent over the past weeks now felt absurd in the face of evidence. I could see it in his eyes, the panic, the realization that he had underestimated me. By the time closing arguments rolled around, I felt almost detached. This wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about watching arrogance crumble under the weight of truth. And when my lawyer finished, presenting the final piece of evidence, a time-stamped log of my property's survey lines, the judge nodded, silently acknowledging the case was clear. I sat back, heart racing but oddly calm. The judge would make a decision soon. I had done everything I could. I had played every card, planned every move, and now it was time for the final act. As the court recessed for deliberation, I glanced at the HOA president. His face was pale, lips pressed tight, hands shaking slightly. I smiled, just a small, subtle smile. One that said, "I told you not to mess with me." The door closed behind the judge and the waiting began. But one thing was certain, after this, nothing would ever be the same. The bulldozer, the stakes, the surveys, they were more than tools, they were symbols. Symbols of standing up, of planning, and of refusing to let bureaucracy trample what is rightfully yours. And deep down, I knew victory was closer than it had ever been. The courtroom was silent as the judge returned. Every eye was on him, every breath held. I could feel my own heartbeat echoing in my ears, steady but fast, like the drum roll of a movie climax. Weeks of tension, planning, and small victories were about to be tested in a single, decisive moment. The judge cleared his throat, shuffled some papers, and looked up. After reviewing the evidence, testimony, and documents presented, he began, "It is clear that the construction in question has encroached upon private property." I felt a rush of relief, almost like wind against my face, as if I had been trapped underwater for weeks and was finally surfacing. But I didn't celebrate just yet. I waited. Judges like to savor these moments, and this one did. The HOA president's face went from smug to pale. I could see him trying to muster an argument to find a loophole, but he was frozen, caught mid-sentence in his own arrogance. I leaned back slightly in my chair, feeling the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had outmaneuvered him at every turn. The judge continued. "The defendant, Mr. Narrator's name, has provided sufficient evidence, including property surveys, drone footage, and witness testimony, confirming rightful ownership of the land. The HOA is hereby ordered to cease construction immediately and is liable for damages incurred as a result of the illegal encroachment." I had to resist the urge to grin too widely. This was it. The vindication, the payoff, the moment I had imagined 1,000 times during late nights plotting and measuring every inch of my property. And the judge added, flipping a page, "The HOA shall compensate Mr. Narrator's name for legal fees and related expenses." My eyes widened. 6 figures. Not just property restored, not just my rights confirmed, but a financial victory that was as satisfying as the justice itself. I could practically see the HOA president's thoughts unraveling in real time. As the judge finished, I stood up slowly, careful not to spill the tension I had carried for weeks. The courtroom murmured. Some neighbors were whispering, some were smiling. I could see my lawyer giving me a subtle thumbs up. And across the room, the HOA president looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under him. I couldn't resist it any longer. I let a small, controlled smile creep across my face. A smile that said, "I told you, I warned you, and now here we are." The president tried to protest, but the judge silenced him with a firm glance. The papers were signed, the ruling was official, and for the first time in weeks I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The bulldozer, the orange stakes, the surveys, they all mattered. Every move I had made, every moment of preparation had led to this. After the courtroom cleared, neighbors approached me, some with congratulations, others with wide eyes of disbelief. "I can't believe you did that," one whispered. Another chuckled nervously. "You really went full-on action hero with that bulldozer." I laughed, a genuine, satisfying laugh. "Sometimes," I said, "you have to make them realize you're not joking, you're serious. And yes, sometimes a bulldozer helps make that point." Back at home, I walked across my property, surveying the land I had fought for. The stakes had been removed, the construction halted, and everything was officially mine. Every tree, every blade of grass, every inch I had nurtured for years. It was restored, respected, and for the first time in weeks, peaceful. I couldn't resist one last glance at the half-built clubhouse. It stood frozen, unfinished, a monument to HOA arrogance and a personal trophy of my perseverance. I even joked aloud to myself, "Guess who owns the land now? Hint, it's me." That night I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, the setting sun casting golden light across my yard. I thought about the lessons learned, patience, planning, preparation, and the audacity to fight back. The HOA had underestimated me, and now they would remember this for a long time. And me, I had more than victory, I had validation, I had justice. I had proven that standing up for what's yours isn't just right, it can be immensely satisfying. Tomorrow, the neighborhood would whisper about it, the HOA would reconsider its authority, and I would enjoy every single moment of my hard-earned triumph. Sometimes justice comes slow, sometimes it comes loud, and sometimes it comes with a bulldozer. The week after the courtroom victory felt surreal. Every morning I walked across my property like a general surveying the battlefield he had won. The stakes were gone, the half-built clubhouse sat abandoned, and for the first time in weeks, the land felt like mine, truly mine. Neighbors peeked out their windows, whispered in the streets, and some even waved as I passed by. I'd earned a reputation in Highland Pines that I hadn't asked for but rather had been thrust upon me by sheer audacity. The bulldozer hero, some joked. I laughed along, knowing the truth was far simpler. I just refused to let bureaucracy run over me. The HOA, they were quiet, shockingly quiet. I heard rumors through the grapevine, meetings canceled, the president avoiding phone calls, and some board members quietly resigning. Apparently 6 figures in a court order have a way of sobering even the most confident bureaucrats. I didn't gloat, not out loud anyway. I let my victory speak for itself. But peace didn't mean life went back to normal immediately. I had to repair the subtle damages, the ruts from the bulldozer, the disturbed landscaping, the lingering tension with a few nosy neighbors. I spent mornings planting flowers along the property line, afternoons rebuilding fences with a satisfying precision, and evenings sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunset over my fully reclaimed land. I laughed more than once when I caught someone staring at the abandoned clubhouse like it was a haunted house. It was poetic justice, a monument to arrogance frozen in time, while I sat comfortably in the glow of a victory I had earned with patience, planning, and a healthy dose of boldness. I even decided to send a friendly, subtle note to the HOA president, nothing aggressive, just a simple reminder. "Dear Mr. Peterson, hope you're enjoying your new perspective on property boundaries. Best regards, my name." It was short, sharp, and to the point, and somewhere I like to imagine it stung just enough. The story didn't just stay with me, it spread. A few neighbors came by to congratulate me, some even jokingly asking for a bulldozer lesson. I smiled and shook my head. "It's not just about machines," I told them. "It's about knowing your rights, planning carefully, and having the guts to act when the time is right." In the evenings, I often reflected on how absurd the whole thing had been. Letters, threats, fines, and an entire HOA thinking they could take what wasn't theirs. And yet here I was, victorious, 6 figures richer, and my land untouched. It was almost cinematic, the kind of story you imagine in a movie but never think could happen to you. I also learned something about people. Fear can be powerful, but so can determination. Authority can be intimidating, but facts, preparation, and patience are stronger. And sometimes a bulldozer is not just a machine, it's a statement. Weeks later, I hosted a small gathering on my property, just neighbors, coffee, and a few laughs. I pointed to the abandoned clubhouse and said, "See that? That's what happens when people think you'll back down." Everyone laughed, some nervously, some in awe, and I realized that this was more than a personal victory. It was a lesson, a story people would talk about long after the wood rotted and the stakes disappeared. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the land I had fought for, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not just for winning, but for standing up, for taking action, and for proving that sometimes patience, planning, and courage can achieve what intimidation and bureaucracy never could. Sometimes justice is quiet, sometimes it's loud, and sometimes it comes with a bulldozer, 6 figures, and a story worth telling. I raised my coffee cup, smiled at the fading light, and whispered to myself, "Well played." And that, my friends, is how you turn an HOA nightmare into a cinematic, satisfying victory that nobody forgets. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.